The governor of New York is under fire for the lethal path the coronavirus took through the nursing homes of that state. He insists that the state did not cover up deaths. And here's Ben Thomas with the latest.
There was a delay.
Governor Andrew Cuomo acknowledged officials should have moved faster to release information. The state has been forced to acknowledge its count of nursing home deaths excluded thousands of residents who perished after being taken to hospitals.
We didn't answer every question, so it allowed the void to be created. The void begets disinformation. The disinformation begets pain of people. I take responsibility for that.
But at a news conference, Cuomo insisted
all the deaths in the nursing homes and in the hospitals were always fully, publicly, and accurately reported.
Cuomo says he'll have reforms involving hospitals and nursing homes in the upcoming state budget. I'm Ben Thomas.
Let's talk about that tonight with your calls at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626, and with our guest, the founder and CEO of the Guardian Angels, online at guardianangels.org, a radio talk show host with WABC Radio New York, and we understand a mayoral candidate for the forthcoming New York City elections, Curtis Sliwa. Hi, Curtis.
Oh, good to talk to you, Jim, and your Bohannon Nation out there. My hands across America to you.
Well, thank you, sir. Good to have you aboard. And let's start with that news conference from Governor Cuomo here, in which he says that they were slow in providing the information. But I quote from that report, all the deaths in the nursing homes and in the hospitals were always fully, publicly, and accurately reported. True or false?
You see, Jim, you'll know why I call him Andrew Evil Eyes Cuomo. He's chip off the block from his father. I call him Mario Faccia Bruta Cuomo, because they're wordsmiths. What they do is they say one thing, and then their entire staff is not transparent, and they do everything to hide the truth from the general public because they're so pretentious, they're so omnipotent, that both his father when he was alive and Andrew now truly believe that people are not entitled to know these things, that it's a daddy state. You know, he'll say, who's your daddy, pretty much. And with these executive powers, he's been drenched with just this overwhelming sense that he knows what's in our best interest. He can provide for us. We shouldn't question him. And long ago, going back to March, when the lockdown first began, he issued an executive order that everyone questioned, including some of his own supporters. Why would you transfer the elderly who were already in hospitals, who had been diagnosed as being positive for coronavirus, and send them back into a long-term senior citizen care facility? That's like putting gasoline on the fire. And then eventually, when he was caught doing that and he couldn't explain it, he eliminated that executive order. You can't even find it in existence any longer, as if, what, people wouldn't know that it existed? You didn't think people took pictures of it and had used a viral capacity of social networking to spread it around? So he truly believes that we the people are persons of no consequence, and now he's been caught. He's been caught, Jim.
Well, let me ask you about the hospital ship, which I believe, at least early on, was docked in New York Harbor that was supposedly there to take some of the strain off of the New York City health resources. As I understand it, that thing was barely used at all.
No, in fact, Cuomo, remember, had made an appeal to our president at the time, Donald Trump. Remember, he was screaming, I need more ventilators, more ventilators. The president provided them. He sent the U.S. Naval hospital ship to the port of New York City. He also, remember, they also converted Jacob Javits Center in Manhattan, which is the massive convention center, to a triage unit, a sort of a unit that could handle coronavirus patients regardless of their age. And they even turned part of the U.S. Open facility in Queens, where they play the annual tennis tournament, also into additional hospital space. Few, if any, of the beds were used. These senior citizens could have been transferred there. They had set up triage units. It was like military personnel from the National Guard were there, medical personnel. They never used it. So Cuomo has only himself to blame. He had all the resources that he had begged for, shouted for, screamed for. And he's responsible for the death of thousands of elderly people who should not have had to suffer. And by the way, Jim, do you realize that we're approaching a year of the lockdown, and New York is one of the few states that will not permit visitors to their loved ones or their friends in the long-term nursing home care facilities. No visitors whatsoever. This is a disgrace, an absolute disgrace.
I had, in fact, not been aware of that, but we are aware of it now. Now, it seems to me that early on, and there, of course, have been varying versions of what might amount to the Cuomo defense. One of the ones I recall some months ago was that they were forced into what they did by virtue of some federal guidelines. And perhaps if you recall that better than I do, you could explain that what that was about.
Oh, yeah. He said this was, we were following the CDC guidelines. Remember, in New York, he always hammers Trump because this was not a Trump state, as you know. So if you blame Trump, you're going to get a lot of support. But even that didn't fly here in New York. Nobody believed that. Everybody realized that you might have faulted Donald Trump on a number of levels in terms of how he dealt with coronavirus. This was certainly not one of them. He provided his home state at that time with more resource than any other state it had, and rightfully so, because we had more deaths, we had more hospitalizations. In fact, we led the world in deaths and hospitalizations. So New York got everything they needed. It had nothing to do with a CDC order. New Jersey tried to explain their deaths in nursing homes under the same guise. Pretty boy Newsom, who soon might be recalled in California, he tried the same thing. It didn't fly. The CDC and Trump had nothing to do with it. In fact, if you remember, we were afraid, Jim, that if given executive order powers, the president of the United States would be drunk with power. He would become a totalitarian dictator. Well, guess what? It wasn't the president. It was the governors that he said, you guys make the decisions for your own state. Cuomo in New York, Murphy in New Jersey, Newsom in California. They were just totalitarian dictators, and they still are.
In terms of what can possibly be done now, the governor's term, of course, expires in 2 years, and there are already discussions, I know, underway regarding impeachment and possibly even recall. Now, the impeachment process in New York State is rather similar to that at the federal level. I think it takes a majority of the assembly, and then a trial would take 2/3 vote of something that is called the New York Court for the Trial of Impeachments, which would be presided over by the lieutenant governor. The justices of the New York Supreme Court are included, and members of the New York State Senate. Both houses of the New York State Legislature are heavily Democratic. What is the likelihood that, in fact, an impeachment and conviction could actually occur of a Democratic governor?
Well, number one, this is a reason that we need recall. 38 states have various levels of recall. We're seeing it play out again in California. But New York doesn't have that, and we should have that. Yes, there is the potential of impeachment, but you have to understand our governor, Andrew Evil Eyes Cuomo. He knows when he's on the ropes, he'll wheel and deal. So a lot of these Democrats who are now jumping ship, there are 9 of them publicly who have done it, more who will be doing it in the following days. He's going to approach them because he has more executive powers than any other governor in the 50 states of the United States. So he has control of the budget, and he will sweeten them up. He will give them projects for their home districts, and they'll do horse trading, and it'll save his governorship. The problem is he would like to win a 4th term, something his father was prevented from doing. When George Pataki, someone who nobody knew, was able to beat him and prevent Mario from having a 4th term as governor, it's almost as if Andrew is on a mission to prove that he can serve 4 terms. But this will strengthen now many of his potential Democratic adversaries because he will have a left-wing primary from some DSA candidate chosen by AOC, all-out crazy Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Who is calling for a full investigation now. She has been very unsupportive of Cuomo.
No, that's true, but she was late to join into this. And I think there's going to be some wheeling and dealing going on with the Democrats. The Republicans, as you mentioned, The Democrats have a supermajority in our state legislature. That means they can even overrule Andrew Cuomo. But he'll make deals. He'll survive. The way you affect Andrew Cuomo is you beat him in the next general election. And there are a number of Republicans who have emerged who have the wherewithal to do that.
And we're going to come back and talk some more about that, take some calls for our guest, again, Curtis Sliwa, as we look at how things are going very south for the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo. 1-866-50-JIMBO, our number, 1-866-505-4626. We'll be back in just a moment. Back to the Jim Bohannon Show at 1-866-50-JIMBO, as the star of New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is very much waning right now. There is even talk of possibly impeaching him. And we're talking to Curtis Sliwa. He is the founder and CEO of the Guardian Angels. He is a talk show host on WABC radio in New York, and also a mayoral candidate in New York for this year, more about which in a moment. Right now, here's a call from Kim in Shields, Michigan. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Jim and Curtis. Yeah, I know what's behind this because what Cuomo did, he didn't rescind his order till 6 or 7 weeks later, but by that time, the nursing homes were all infected with the COVID. Our governor had the same kind of order. She ordered nursing homes in Michigan to take COVID patients. They couldn't test them. They couldn't ask questions. They had to take them. And the Detroit News, on several different occasions, every couple months, they'd say, please, Governor Whitmer, rescind your nursing home order. You know, don't order them to take. Even the Nursing Home Organization of Michigan said, please, they sent her a letter in the summer or something. They said, please rescind your order. You know, this is getting out of control. I know what this was all about. It was about driving the numbers up, the deaths up, because Michigan was one of the worst with deaths. And it turns out, by the way, I told Jim this the other night, the numbers have finally come out, and Michigan's nursing home deaths were, 2/3 of them were elderly in nursing homes. 2/3 of over
Not a major
16,000.
surprise, I suspect. I'd like Curtis to respond. Apparently this is not entirely a New York problem.
No. Michigan, California, and New Jersey had the most horrific death rates per capita per person who was being cared for in these long-term senior citizen healthcare units. But then look at Florida, which has more senior citizens per capita per person than any other state. They had, Jim, nowhere near as many of their clients catching coronavirus, nowhere near as many of their nurses and those that were caring for the elderly who got coronavirus, and nowhere near as number of deaths. So what was it that Florida was doing right, and New York, New Jersey, California, and Michigan were doing wrong? They were allowing for visitation. They were testing people. They were allowing for some normalcy so that the elderly, many of them who have dementia or Alzheimer's, who felt so alone, who had no contact with any loved ones, and naturally that probably propelled them to have an early death. Whereas in Florida, they still had communication and ongoing interaction with their loved ones, family, and friends. I think that made the biggest difference, in addition to the testing that was taking place in those facilities.
Got to ask you about this, Curtis. So you're running for mayor of New York. I know among those who are taking on Governor Cuomo now is the mayor, Bill de Blasio. Your thoughts about that race?
Well, thank God, Bill de Blasio, who's been a part-time mayor, and maybe the worst mayor in my lifetime, he has just destroyed this city single-handedly. He's been term limited out. So as a result, there's about 20 different Democrats vying to win the Democratic slot in the Democratic primary. I mean, they go from people like, Yang, who wants to give money to everybody, $5,000.
The former presidential candidate, yeah.
Right. We're on the brink of fiscal dissolvement because we're broke. There's no money here, and the city has not come back to life. and you get a guy like Yang who just wants to give away money, we may become bankrupt. And then you have some other candidates not as well known as him, but they're moving so far to the left. They want to defund the police. They want to defund prisons. And crime has become the number one issue. And that's why so many people have encouraged me to run on the Republican line, because they look at me as if I'm a mini Rudy Giuliani who came to the forefront in 1993 when this city was falling into the abyss because of all the crime. And as a result, they feel I have the same pathway to potential victory. And it's all about crime. It's all about public safety, quality of life. If we can't reinstill a quality of life, public safety, and create a crime-free environment, nobody's going to come to New York. People are going to continue to escape from New York. And business is not going to want to invest in New York. It all starts with public safety.
Yeah, and I must ask you about the guardian angels. Of course, the need for the guardian angels has varied from year to year, and frankly, from mayoral administration to mayoral administration. Has the need for the guardian angels grown under de Blasio?
Oh, absolutely, tenfold, because not only do you have the normal crime problems and gang-related problems and the pervert problems that women have to deal with in the subways, but can you believe this, Jim? There are normally, before the pandemic, 5.5 million passengers a day who take the buses and the trains of the city's Metropolitan Transit Authority. There are now only 1 million people, and those are essential workers. The other people who could take the subways and buses won't because of the crime. And there's been a crime increase of 30% over last year, when 5.5 million people would take the subways and buses every day. So 70% less riders, and yet 30% more crime. And there's complete anarchy. The officials have created a degree of impotence for the police. The police are not permitted to physically engage people. They're not preemptive any longer. They're reactive. And so we've got to basically restore the confidence in the police department. They need a morale boost. They need a cheerleader. And quite frankly, all the candidates who have announced so far, most of them Democrats, they just want to impale the police. They want to render them to be even more ineffective than they are now.
You have been a major figure in helping citizens to protect themselves in New York. You've been a major factor on the media scene for any number of years now, and now running for mayor. Would that complete a Curtis Sliwa bucket list if you were to win?
No doubt. On my tombstone, and as you know, Jim, there have been many times the Grim Reaper has tried to grab me 6 feet under and put me in a cardboard box, and I've been able to escape that, from gang attacks to organized crime to the Gottis and Gambinos who had me shot 5 times with hollow point bullets back in the summer of 1992. I've been able to battle the Grim Reaper and win. So if I could become mayor of the city of New York, and remember, I was born and raised in the city. My baptism has been in the subways and in the streets and the public housing projects. Then, yes, I will have completed the cycle, and I will be able to bring New York City back to where it was when we had 20 years of Republican leadership who were mayor.
Wow.
You had 8 years of Rudy Giuliani, 12 years of Michael Bloomberg, and it was the safest big city in America.
We will wrap on that note, and clock is running out. Curtis Sliwa, never underestimate him. Back in a moment.